The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. It's just a bit after 11 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started with this. So welcome to our webinar on what's new in Autodesk Revit 2020. I can see there might be a few more people coming in at this time, so by the time we actually get into the presentation, we'll have a few people online at that point. So we'll go ahead and get started. So again, welcome. This is a webinar on overview of what's new in Revit 2020. My name is Patrick Hill. I'm with TPM, been here for quite a while. You can see I'm the Technical Services Manager for the AEC division. We have quite a number of divisions to work with, but this time we want to work with the Revit product. Before we get rolling too far here, I do want to have you guys take a look at the webinar interface. We will be taking questions hopefully during, or if not at the end of the webinar. So if you have anything, please go into the questions tab on your web interface and ask a few questions there. And if I don't see them during the presentation itself, I will be looking at the questions at the end of the presentation because we are in a listen-only mode. So that way it won't be too distracting if somebody happens to go into a phone call or puts us on hold or something along those lines. We won't be distracted with that. So again, please ask your questions if you have any in there, and we'll address those during or after the point as we're going. Give me a chance too to go ahead and let you know about TPM. We have been in business for 45 years. I want to take this opportunity to show you what we have available to you as the services that we offer. A lot of companies are not aware of what all we do. A lot of them are aware of maybe the software we sell. And in case in point with this webinar being AEC, a lot of people are aware of our Autodesk connection and probably our support and training. But you can see we also work in manufacturing division, data management with product life management products, printing for trade show graphics, vehicle graphics, as well as the copiers, large format printers. And one of the newer industries that we're excited to get into for the last year and a half, 2 years is 3D printing, specifically the Mark Forged and the HP Jet Fusion technologies. We've had a lot of exciting products come out, and it seems like a really exciting area to be in. We're happy to be there and be part of it. With that being said, I want to go ahead and get started into the presentation itself. We're obviously not going to have time to see everything with a live demo, so I do want to have this slide on screen so we can see a lot of the changes and enhancements that occurred on the Revit product. Autodesk has usually done for the last couple of years, they somewhat categorize these types of enhancements. And this year you can see we have a connect category, a create category, and an optimize category. So they've tried to address or, create enhancements and improvements addressing some of these specific areas that are out there. I'll leave this up here on the screen for another moment or two so you can read through some that will be important to you. Again, we're not going to have time to look through all these with the live demo, but we'll be showing some of the more important ones, ones that people tend to be more excited about and have been on the wish list for quite a while. For instance, the PDF and the Revit. We've had that capability in AutoCAD for a number of years, and so now we can do that in Revit as well. Elliptical walls, steel connection propagation for the steel guys, path of travel for lines of egress for architects. And some of these enhancements, of course, are generic across multiple disciplines, so we will be showing that. I do want to take this opportunity, though, and point out that this particular presentation will be geared towards architecture, a little bit of steel, and in general, the improvements across all disciplines. However, our specialist, Bruce Harris, has just published a what's new in MEP 2020. So I want to take this opportunity, this chance to let everybody aware of the fact that we do have a YouTube channel. If you go into YouTube and look for TPM Solutions, you'll see our channel is named TPM Solutions. And we've got about 3 or 4 years worth of content under there. And as a result, one of the things that we've got up there is a MEP specific what's new. This particular webinar will not go through the MEP, but we do have a video posted on the YouTube channel for that. So if you're interested in that particular discipline, would certainly encourage you to go over there and take a look at that. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what we've got in terms of capabilities. Again, one of the areas they've worked with is the connect area. And you'll see one of the first things that people are interested in is the PDF, being able to bring PDF into Revit. You can bring multi-page PDFs in or single-page PDFs. Once the PDFs are in, they come in as backgrounds or foregrounds, and you have the ability to snap to that geometry as long as there's vector data there. If it's nothing but a pure raster image, you will not be able to snap to it, but with vector data you can. So we'll be taking a look at that. Also, publishing clouds on the Revit home screen. So in 2019, Autodesk introduced the concept of the home screen. Historically, we might have called that the start page, where you're not in a project, but you're at that beginning page where you're looking at your recent files. You'll see here shortly when we get into it that we can also access and see what is on our BIM 360 hub or up on the cloud. One of the things they've added is the ability to publish from that home page. This is actually a big time saver. In the past, if we had our work shared documents or collaborative document Revit project up in the cloud, we had to actually open that project up, bring it down to our local machine, and then once it was loaded into our local machine, we could then go into the publish utilities to say we want to publish this. We then had to synchronize back to the cloud and then wait for that publish to occur. And quite honestly, none of that required to be on our local machine. So the act of publishing to create that web model is done solely in the cloud on the services on Autodesk. So this allows us to simply access the project file and say we want to publish the latest changes rather than having to wait for it to open up. Along the same lines, working with the cloud, we do now have a save as. So for anybody working on a project that is not using the BIM 360 design, maybe they're only using the docs portion, and with the docs portion of the BIM 360 design, they would be able to log onto the website, review, create redline markups to view the imagery. But they really was rather difficult, or at least somewhat painful, to put the model up there. You could do it, but you had to, log into your website and then take the model off your local drive and either browse to it or drag and drop, which certainly is not very difficult. But now we have the ability to do a save as and save directly to what's called a cloud model. So effectively allowing us to, browse to our project hub and save a model up to that location. Please note that that is not the methodology we use to actually use BIM 360 design and open up a work shared project so that we can synchronize. This is simply a method to allow us to have effectively a standalone model outside of our workflows, but could be linked in. This might be something that a consultant might use that is not using BIM 360 design, and maybe they only want to use docs portion. We also have Autodesk has improved the ability to work with SketchUp. The SketchUp import feature, frankly, hadn't been changed in probably 10 years. So now they've updated to recognize the latest versions of SketchUp and to work with the colors from SketchUp. And a lot of people are bringing the SketchUp models into families and then importing the family into the project itself. So better integration with the existing SketchUp tools. From there, we go into create. Some other options we have available to, again, another area that they wanted to concentrate on. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, elliptical walls. We've had quite a few people over the years ask for this feature, and here it is. It's a great feature. We've been needing it for a while. As far as working with it, quite honestly, if you know how to draw walls with the other tools, you can still do it with elliptical tools. The only thing that you probably want to of note is that when drawing an elliptical wall, you can only work off the center line. You cannot work with outside edge or inside edge, or sorry, outside face or inside face. But at that point, it's still a wall. You can trim it, you can work with it, you can swap out wall types. It is a wall. We just simply now have the shape of elliptical walls to work with us. Moving on to another area, some structural stuff with rebar. We have some improved rebar copy capabilities. We can snap now a little bit more efficiently and is aware of the cover for our rebar elements. Specifically, if we have extensions above other rebar, that rebar extension is now seen as the distance to the cover as opposed to the main element itself. We also have some other tools for dimensioning rebar as well that have been added working with us. Again, pretty much tied to somebody going to be doing fabrication or prefabrication with some of the rebar geometry that's out there. Along the same lines with rebar is the annotation and dimensioning. We now have the ability to work with these rebar sets and have annotation worked more easily accessed when working with rebar. Along the same lines of steel is we've had some changes to the steel connections. In 2019, we were introduced to these steel connections, and they were for want of a better term, they were individualized. We could change the parameters per each individual connector. That's a little bit different now. This is actually a much better improved method of workflow. With steel connections and propagation, once a connection has been created, we can propagate those changes to other like members. You'll see what that means is that if I have the same columns or beams as well as the beam sizes, then the exact same connector can be used in multiple locations. We'll show you this in the demo live here in a little bit. Tied to this is the way you work with the steel connections themselves. In other words, we're now working a little bit more Revit-like in the fact that with Revit we have family instances and we have type parameters. Now, for those of you working with Revit, these family types is where we're going to be changing our properties now. In the past, the properties of a steel connector were instance-based. That was convenient, but it also made it almost impossible to propagate or use that same type of steel connector at multiple locations. So they've moved the ability to edit those parameters over into the type properties. And that's what we're seeing here with the edit type parameters. You configure how you want those connectors and those elements to be within the steel connection. You can see a little screenshot there. And once that's been developed, we can then propagate those connections over to other members, and we'll be showing this live in a little bit with the demo as well. From there, we go into the optimize category that Autodesk has created, and this was another feature that people have been asking for quite some time, is a path of travel. This allows us to pick 2 points, a starting point and ending point, and then Revit will calculate the shortest distance of path travel between those 2 points. It does understand obstacles. I'll show you this when we get into the product as to what elements, what modeled elements you want to see as obstacles. For instance, doors are modeled in 3D, but by default, the doors are not seen as obstacles. So you can see in the graphic there where the path of travel goes through the doors because it's not seen as an obstacle. All right. Some other minor changes, but convenient nonetheless, is if you're using any of the view filters when working with your overriding of visibility graphics or saying that you want to go into visibility graphics and filter by data, we now have the OR option. We've had the AND option was introduced last year. Now we have an OR capability. So now we can see things like I want walls that are 1 hour rated or 2 hour rated or non-rated in 1 hour. So rather than having 2 separate queries, we can now combine those into one query. The PDF improvements, we've already talked about the fact that the PDF comes in is now an option to have. We can also manage the PDFs through our image manager. So for all intents and purposes, the way Revit sees the PDF is an image. And so just like managing any of our other images, we can now manage our PDFs through the image manager as well. And we can change from an absolute or relative path when we do that, or place another instance of that image or PDF. That allows us to do that. Also, the scaling parameters are part of the properties. I will show you probably an easier way, or maybe not so much easier, but a method to use when bringing in a PDF, or frankly an image for that matter, that lets you scale it to be able to use if you can be tracing geometry using PDF as an underlay for other geometry. And then from there, we also have a nice feature where we're copying and pasting. Oftentimes we have legend. Legend view is one of the claims to fame of the legend view is the fact that it's one of the few elements that can be placed on the same view, can be placed on multiple sheets. Typically we have first floor construction can only be placed once. A first floor life safety plan can only be placed once. But legend views by their nature can be placed multiple times on multiple sheets. One of the things that's been problematic in the past is when we take a legend view, we want it to be placed on multiple sheets at the same location. So now we can do a copy paste command. They've enhanced the copy paste, and now we have a paste to same place. You'll see there on the screenshot with the drop down for the paste command. So that will allow us to quickly get the same legend view on multiple sheets. Some smaller stuff too, for instance, like the info center reduction. With the way we are now using our tabbed pages, it takes up one more horizontal line, and we've now probably kept our quick access toolbar at the very top of the screen. It's getting a little tight up there, so Autodesk has simply collapsed the info bar here when we're searching for geometry into an arrow. So just be aware that it hasn't gone away. It's just simply collapsed, and you simply pick on the black arrow to expand it back out if you're searching for any particular phrase or questions under the Help Center. I also want to point out that the Dynamo actually shifts with 2020. We've had Dynamo for quite some time. For those of you that are not aware what Dynamo is simply a visual type of graphical programming. So it allows you to not necessarily start off with typing in code to program or customize Revit, but allows you to take modules that can be drug onto a canvas and then use lines or pipes to connect the geometry. It sounds a little odd, it's hard to describe, and we'll probably be doing a Dynamo webinar in the near future. But the idea is to not necessarily work with a ton of code and be a programmer, but to say, I want to take these modules and connect it to these modules and then use this value to make something happen automatically. That concept of Dynamo is now shipping with 2020. We've had Dynamo with Revit, but it's always been a separate install, and it's now part of the Revit base install. And any hot fixes or improvements, updates to Revit will also include Dynamo rather than a separate Dynamo update. Along the same lines, Dynamo has been updated to now include steel connections. For the steel folks that are out there, we can now use these Dynamo nodes and customizations of Dynamo to work with these steel connections and a lot of the improvements that we've already talked about. So if you need to, somewhat standardize, or not standardized, but if you want to customize the clips and make some type of automated changes to a number of clips at one time, it can be done in this way as well. Along the same lines with steel, in the terms of optimizing, they have taken the code for steel detailing elements with the connections and put those out into a different thread on the CPU. End result is a faster response time. It's a background process for steel connections, so you could actually start panning and zooming to a new location while the steel connection is being updated in the background. This is one thing that you don't necessarily have to worry about having that be done at the exact same time some other process occurs, because it's kind of its own capabilities, its own modular piece of information that can be updated for that one connector. So now we have that as some enhanced improvements. All right, with that being said, let's go ahead and maybe switch over to Revit and take a look at what some of this stuff looks like. All right, so I'm gonna bear with me while I try to tab over to our Revit. And hopefully y'all are seeing my Revit screen. Now, with the Revit, let's talk what we're seeing here. This is our home screen. And again, we now have that capability of getting the home page with this icon up here. There's a couple of things I want to bring to your attention. One of those is that on the home screen, we now have access, as we always had, to our recent files here. So this hasn't changed much in the last few years. But what has changed is the access of our cloud-based models here under the BIM 360. So I can access and open a model, a cloud-based model from here. The reason this is important is because when I go to my open dialog box in 2019 and 18, we actually had a big B, just like we have B for BIM right here. We had one here, and that is no longer there. Now this will be your primary way of accessing your hubs, and then whatever projects you have access to can come from here. To that end, while we're here, we'll talk about one of the other features we have, and that is that when I navigate to a particular hub or a project, and then I go into my project files or wherever it's at, this is what I was talking about earlier about the fact that we don't actually have to open up a project now, although I accidentally did, so my mistake. I'll back out of this and I'll show you how we can do that. And this is exactly why you want to have this, so we don't have to open up a hub to accomplish this. Open up the project to accomplish this. Once we have this selected, we can now publish. So rather than having to wait for the file, especially a large file, luckily for us, it was not a very large file and it didn't take very long to open. Had that been a large resort or a school, it might take a few minutes to download. So as a result, we can now simply select the element, the project, and say we want to publish it. We cannot change the publishing parameters. So those of you that are familiar with the publish capabilities of BIM 360, it simply takes the current published set and updates it. It creates a new published set. So we can do that now without having to open up the project. All right, so from there, let's go ahead and start off with steel, and then we'll switch over to more of an architectural and general focus. So again, some of these capabilities, for instance, the recent files and accessing the BIM 360 cloud is across multiple disciplines. Now going into the steel connections, we'll show you how we can work with some of the steel in these connections. So I've got a small little project here to show you the concept of how these work. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate this up just a little bit so we can see and zoom in. The way the connections are working, we've had connections introduced last version as well. So under structure or under steel, we can go to our connection. Now before I go to connection, I want to point out to the fact that we do have connection settings here. This allows me to determine which connections I want to use in my project. Honestly, I haven't counted them. There's probably about 60 or so types of connections that are available in the Revit structural package. You can see these are all listed here on the left side. I don't necessarily need all of these. As a matter of fact, I guarantee I don't need all these. And depending on where you are in the country, the type of work that you're doing, the type of project it is, you're not necessarily going to need all these either. Now we can filter through this and say, well, we really only want to look at any type of tube connection. So now we're looking at just the tube connections. If we're going to be using some gussets or brace gusset with tubes, we can look at our general bracing elements when we want to do for our gusset bracing and gusset attachment points. And we can simply add these over by simply double clicking that adds it to our loaded connection. So now these three would be connections that would be available to me in my project. This is actually quite nice because I don't necessarily want to scroll through all of these if I know that I'm not going to be using them. Again, I can double click on this and it simply removes it out. For sake of time, we're going to keep it with these two. So once that's in place, we simply say we want to do a connection. And we do a connection by saying we want to pick this member. I'm holding down the control key, pick this member, and then I hit the enter key to finish my selection. When this is done, you'll see we get a representation with the steel connections, and that is the solid circle here represents the main leg, and this is the second leg. I can simply pick, hold down, and drag, and it will switch legs if I want to reference my beam versus my column as leg 1 or leg 2 or main leg. Once that's in place, you'll see I simply have a generic connection in place. This little circle with two lines simply says, hey, there's a connection here, but I don't know a specific type that's involved. When a connection is identified, from the drop-down list, we can see which connections are available. Now, Revit does use a little bit of fuzzy logic in the fact that it says, well, I've only got a base plate and this clip angle available. So obviously this can't use a base plate, so it gives me only what's applicable for what I have available. So I'm going to say I want to put a clip angle in here. And when we're done, I want to bring this up and show you that it's actually not going to be visible. And you're going to say, well, why would that be? The reason for that is because the connections themselves are only visible in fine detail view. So I was in medium. If I switch over to fine detail, now I actually get that clip angle that's out there. The clip angle has properties. It is its own element. And kind of moving on here, you'll see in the past we could modify the properties per instance, but now we can modify these per type. This actually makes a lot more sense. So for instance, I'm going to duplicate this, call it clip angle, beam, column, typical, because I want to use it at multiple locations. I can now edit these parameters. And my preview is essentially live. So before I can commit any changes, I can actually see what do I want to change here. So for instance, we can change the type of steel that we're using, the legs that we want to use, the sizes. I'm not going to go through every one of these, but you can see we can control the properties if we have any type of coping condition, bolt parameters, vertical bolts, shim plates. Every connection has a very unique set of parameters to work with. So for instance, maybe we want to work with our vertical bolts, just to show you that if I were to do 4 lines, I end up getting 4 bolts. And obviously it won't fit because you can see the flanges out here, so the bolts don't work. So it's all real time. And if I change distances between bolts, I can see how that affects the geometry as I'm working. Once I'm happy with all of these changes, I simply pick OK. And now those changes of whatever I made have been created and applied to that member. I'm sorry, that connector. And you see it's now called the clip angle beam column type, typical. Why would I want that? Well, because now that I have that fairly unique situation, I can say, well, I want to take that particular connection and I want to propagate that connection. So what it does is Revit sees that these other elements out here on the project have the same column and the same beam size, so therefore those clips are propagated throughout the project, and I don't have to sit there and do every one of them individually. And again, this is based off the same parameters. So if this were a deeper or a thicker, larger size of steel, this clip would not go there. It does have to have the exact same condition for both of these to work. And we have the ability to take these connections and customize them so we can add plates or add some unique geometry to them as well. So again, having our properties in the family type allow us to propagate this, and a huge time-saving feature for working with steel and adding connections. Let's go back, and we're going to switch over now to some more generic geometry here. We're going to open up a architectural base file. And opening up this architectural file, a few things to look at. One is, let's just go ahead and come down here to the bottom area, and we're going to see how easy it is to simply draw some elliptical walls. It's pretty straightforward. Under our wall command, you'll see we now have added the elliptical wall command. And it's just a matter of going in. Notice, as I said earlier, the only thing available during an elliptical wall is a wall centerline, so be aware of that. And from there, you just simply indicate your major axis and your minor axis, and now you have your elliptical walls. These are editable, they're modifiable, can be moved, you can even trim them, so they are walls in the true sense. So if I want to remove and get rid of these elements, I can now get rid of that and have a partial elliptical wall as well. All right. So another thing that we have available to us, as I was discussing earlier, that's been on our wish list item, is working with legends. So if we go to our legend view, I've created a simple legend of wall types that are here. And of course, we drag and drop these legend views onto multiple sheets, or at least a sheet, which I've got. So I now have a sheet here that has our legend on it. And you'll see it is not on any of these other sheets. So quite often we want that type of legend, or sorry, that specific legend view to be on multiple sheets. So I can now select that view once it's been placed on a sheet. I can then come up here and do our copy to clipboard. And then once I'm on a new sheet that doesn't have it, I can go to my paste command and now have aligned to the same place. So now I'm able to take that view and copy it into multiple sheets, and it's placed at the exact same location. In the past, we've had to use guide grids or possibly create some line work, or try to use a move command and then know we're moving at exactly a certain amount of locations off of some known points. So it makes it much easier to have the same view, the same legend view. And again, this is only applicable to legend views because views generally can only be placed once in a project, but legends can be placed multiple times. So again, new is copying and pasting of the legend views. Going back to the base, we now have our floor plan. And I'm going to switch over to inserting or working with PDFs and show you how that works. Inserting a PDF, we go to our insert command, tab up top, and you'll see now we have PDF has been added. We've had images, we can bring in CAD files and Revit files, and now we have the PDF insert command here. With that selected, I'm going to go and show you two options here. Just as a PDF background, I want you to be aware of the fact that you can choose a multi-paged PDF or even a singular PDF. So if I open up this one, this is a multi-page PDF, and sure enough, it opens up and previews the multiple pages within that PDF. I can enlarge the view by looking at a larger thumbnail, and then I can simply scroll through each page to get an idea of what's on that page. If I want to, I can bring in a particular page that I've got selected, and then once that page is selected, I can bring that in. I want to show you how this would work too. when I bring it in, I'm going to bring in a singular PDF. So now this one is just one page I want to bring in. When you bring in the PDFs, you can choose the resolution, the DPI you want. You need to be cognizant of this. If you plan or expect to be bringing in a lot of PDFs, you're not going to want to do them all at 600 DPI if you don't need them. The 600 DPI I'm going to use because I want to show you how we can snap to corners and use the snapping tools to accommodate either tracing or creating new geometry or comparing it. However, not all of your PDFs are in a situation where you need to trace them. It could be you're only printing at 150 or 300 DPI, so it'd be a waste of time and resources to bring in 600 DPI. So be aware of that. And as you'll even see with this smaller project, it will take a few seconds for this to come in. And by the way, this is a little bit slower because we are recording this webinar, so it does go a little bit slower. Just like bringing in any other image, I get the extents of the image here, and you can see I can drop that in place, and I now have that PDF as a background. If we zoom in a little closer, you'll see that it is there. It looks gray tone simply because of how far zoomed out we are. I'm going to switch this over to wireframe so we can see through it a little bit easier. Now, as a PDF, it can be managed. So as I said earlier, if we go to our manage images command up top here, we'll get a dialog box that lets us see that PDF, where it came from, and its location, whether it's absolute or relative. And we can place another instance just like we can for any imagery that we have that's out there. The other thing you're going to want to do is snap to this and work with it. So I'm going to move this. Now I can just simply pick it and somewhat randomly move it and get it into position. And what I want to do is you'll see that this comes in effectively one-to-one size. If I plot out a 24 by 36 sheet or 30 by 40, it does have the ability to say a scaling factor here, so it was scaled up in terms of where it needs to be, but it's not the right size it needs to be. So one of the things we're going to want to do is move and snap and scale. So I can pick on my PDF, and up here is where I'm going to enable snaps. And you do have to enable them. This is not on by default. So we want to enable these snaps. So I can now zoom in here a little tighter so we can see what I'm doing, as well as I can see what we're doing. Now, if I'm simply going to move, I'm going to say I want to snap to the corner of the PDF wall and snap it to the corner of my Revit wall. So now I know they're at the same locations. Now that being said, you'll see that the image or the PDF that comes in is not full size. It was scaled down based off the PDF print size. So what we're going to do, we can do this with our images, we can do this with our PDF. So now I'm going to say I want to take my PDF and I'm going to scale it. So I want to say that the existing PDF base point is starting here. The existing PDF length is here. However, I want that length to be over here. And now I've scaled up my PDF to be the same size as my building, my project itself. And here I can compare these and see that the geometry is not the same. It's a little bit hard to see because I'm using wireframes, but if I switch back over to hidden line, now it's a little bit easier to see what is the geometry that's in my project versus what's coming in from the PDF. So if we needed to add geometry or trace it, we can do that, again, because we've enabled snaps. So we can use our walls, our line work, and actually snap to that geometry within the PDF. All right. So that's, again, what's new to, for our PDF capability, something we've been asking for quite some time. This can be turned off, which I'm going to do now to make it a little bit easier to see our next demonstration, and that is our path of travel. So I'm going to zoom in here just a little bit so we can see this. And the path of travel is now under the Analyze tabbed page up top here. So we have our path of travel. Now before I do the path of travel, I want to kind of show you what's going on here with our settings. So again, we have this diagonal arrow that allows us to see the settings of how the path of travel is going to work. So Revit will never consider the following obstacles: hidden, demolished, or underlaid elements. In other words, it will go through it never consider those as obstacles when it's determining the path of travel. In addition, what else do we not want to see as an obstacle? And as I said earlier, doors. I don't want to see doors as an obstacle because we want to be able to walk through and open up a door and work with it. So as a result, when I now say I want to do a path of travel, let's say I want to start here, and now we can pick where we want to go to, and it then creates this path of travel. Now that path of travel has some information to it. A couple of things. One is there is a line type that I've asked it to use. So I have to create it. There is already a path of line travel line type. So just as a quick aside, let me show you that if we go into our manage, under our settings, we go to our line styles, and you'll see there is a path of travel line here. And it's just a matter of determining the line weight and the type of line pattern I want to use. And I've chosen a -1/8 inch. This path can have a mark tied to it, so you can tag this as well. So if you want to tag it as a path 1, path 2, or path 3, this can be labeled and used as well. And when we put in multiples, of course, you're not limited to that. So if we want to put another element here to here, we can see that we get a path of travel here. Now, a couple of things that come into play with this path of travel. When I pick on this, I do get information over here in the properties box. Again, we can see the line style that's in use. And notice I have speed at 3 miles an hour, the view that it's on, and the length that the path is. And based off 3 miles an hour with that length, we have effectively a 30-second time of travel. And that's done for each one of these elements. Now, I want to point out to you, when I started playing with this and when Autodesk introduced it to us, we were playing with this and seeing that this stuff's grayed out. And what if I don't want to do 3 miles per hour? What if I want to do faster or slower? You'll also notice our from room and to room is not available. And you might say, well, you don't have any rooms placed. True, I do not. However, I just want to point out to you that even if I have rooms placed, the from room and to room is not available at this time. So when asked about this, Autodesk responded that they wanted to go ahead and deliver this capability to us now and have these tools essentially fixed in terms of speed that will be used. They will be added at a later time. Same with the from room and to room. The bones of the system to be able to give us the from room and to room are in there, but they're not quite active. And Autodesk decided to go ahead and to give us this capability now. And in the next few months, when we get some updates, we will have access to these parameters and be able to change them. All right. So I want you to be aware of that. Once we have our paths created, we can also want to look at how we can work with this. So for instance, you can see my furniture is not seen as an obstacle. So if I go back in and say that I want to now see furniture is an obstacle, when I say okay, and then we update this, it doesn't happen automatically. So be aware that you do need to select your elements and update it, and now it will go around the furniture. It sees the furniture as an obstacle. So again, you can determine, depending on your local code, the way you like to create your egress plans, as to what elements are going to be obstacles or not. Once we have these paths created, they can be scheduled. So we can have a schedule that includes all of our path of travel points. So we can have our links out here. And of course, I did not add a mark, but if we added a mark, they'd show up here as well, and they can be labeled. So path of travel is a big update, something people have been wanting for quite some time. So there we go. That is what we're going to be showing you, some of the bigger features of Revit. And as you can see from our previous slides, there's quite a number of enhancements that are out there. And I'm going to switch on back now and see if anybody has any questions for the presentation. And at this time, I don't see any. It doesn't look like anybody's asking any at this time. So hopefully this gave you a good overview of what's new with the 2020 product, Revit 2020. A lot of good enhancements, some smaller, some larger. We try to concentrate on some of the larger ones within this presentation. And if you have any questions or need any more information on this, please don't hesitate to call our TPM offices and talk to our sales reps. discuss this. And if you require or need a more personalized or in-depth demonstration of some of these products, we'll be happy to help you out there as well. So any other questions are available, I'm going to go ahead and finish the webinar from here. And we certainly appreciate your time. I know everybody's busy, and getting a chance to take a look at what this is. Hopefully that will reduce the amount of time it takes for you to come up to speed with what's new in 2020. So thank you, and we'll catch you again next time.